plus. And so just to let you know that the meeting is being recorded. So after Suhaidatu, then we're going to have Jechitano, who's going to talk about the politics of sex. And then we're going to have Alex Donko, who's going to speak about the situation in Ghana. And as most people here on the call will know, the 21 people who were holding a workshop on how to respond to hate crimes, interestingly, were arrested illegally and are still in police custody in Ho. So Alex will give us an overview not just of that, but of recent events in Ghana, and then we'll have a discussion and then a wrap up. And we're hoping that not only would we all know more about what's going on, but that we would also have a plan of action for how we can work together and build coalitions of solidarity around these issues. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Suhaidatu to unmute herself and give us an introduction to the African context.
I was muted there. Hello, can I be clearly seen and heard? Hello?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I can hear you fine. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm so happy to be here and have this conversation with you all. Today is a happy day because on Hello?
We lost you for a second there, but I think you're back.
Yeah, my microphone got muted.
Yeah, go on then, yeah.
So the African context for LGBTQ people is very checkered and has a long history. Prior to colonization, we had our own ways of dealing with the LGBT matter, should I say. But colonization came with a lot of homophobia, and that has left the continent very homophobic. Then, as knowledge spread and there was progress, many countries started realizing that outmoded practices needed to be let go of, including LGBT practices. But the current wave of homophobia is being heavily enforced, especially by evangelical churches and far-right movements from the United States. Since the 90s, they have been heavily campaigning across the continent, especially feeding false narratives about the existence of LGBT people and trying to create a misconception that it is a Western import that is being utilized to control the continent by Western powers. So they say that through aid, through coining of words such as LGBT, human rights, gender studies, the West seeks to control Africa, especially in terms of our tradition and norms. These movements took hold, especially in English-speaking countries. I believe it's because there isn't a language barrier. And also there's been a lot of support from political leaders and government officials, kind of like Robert Mugabe, Jomo Kenyatta, our presidents, past and present. John Evans Tamils was most vocal during the 2018 debacle, where David Cameron suggested that LGBT people be considered as people on the continent. That got severe backlash across the continent. It was no different for President Obama when he made such mentions, for Jomo Kenyatta to make wild accusations. So what has been happening is a lot of these evangelical missions, especially World Family Congress, Human Life International, seem to be fighting and funding constitutional change in especially English-speaking African countries. a lot of the motivation seems to be coming from the reality that they are losing this battle on home soil. In the US, there are steady movements being made to make the lives of LGBT people safer over there. And it's in turn causing them to, the movements to migrate to Africa and spread the hate here. So these changes seem to be slowly coming in, and they are trying to get countries to repeal positive laws or strengthen homophobic laws in order to heighten their hold on these African countries. And once they infiltrate to the point where they can actually exert enough power to make colonial change, constitutional changes, there might be no turning back. Some of these groups have been linked with movements from Russia, from very homophobic, racist, misogynistic roots. So it's not just LGBT people they stand to threaten here. It's a lot of marginalized movements that they can also exert constitutional change over. Now, as this keeps going, it seems like the approach that these evangelical movements and far right movements are using, it's almost a textbook approach for what they are using to propagate their homophobia. And if you would look at Uganda and draw parallels from how they were able to get the anti-gay bill passed in Uganda, how they were able to get the anti-gay bill passed in Nigeria, it is similar. One of their methods is fear-mongering. So they tie very toxic narratives to Christianity. And because a huge population of Africa, especially Anglo-Africa, is Christian, they are able to come to churches, come to other religious spaces, and spread very false information, such that homosexuality affects the population of the country, and it's a bid by the UN and other development bodies to get Africa's population to stop. They don't want more births in Africa as a way of controlling the bite of Black people. They also say it is unnatural and it's frowned upon in Africa's culture and traditional practices, and that's not heeding these calls to ban the existence of LGBT people could be tantamount to what Sodom and Gomorrah faced in biblical times, and that LGBT people will also corrupt their children. So with these narratives being forwarded through the churches in a very religious context, you have a lot of opinion makers getting on this bandwagon and increasing the general rhetoric of homophobia. Then you have a lot of funding also going to coalitions. A proper coalition like that in Ghana is Four-Meanings Coalition, the National Coalition for Family Values. They are heavily funded by the World Family Congress. And these people were who saw to the passing of the anti-gay bill in Nigeria. They had a conference in Ghana about a year ago, and they are heavily funding Four-Meanings Coalition, which is very big in fighting LGBT people in Ghana. So you take them, you take other people such as Human Life International, ACLG, very rich organizations which can fund politicians, fund their political agendas, and fund their motives. They get into parliament and then they start moving the gears into forming very homophobic laws that targets LGBT people. So it has already worked in Nigeria, it has worked in Uganda, it has worked in Kenya. So by using the media and also silencing LGBT people. So they make the media such that LGBT people cannot get their truths out there. They cannot debunk any of the narratives that is spewed against them from the media. Then they also set law enforcement against LGBT people, especially activists. It's textbook practice. It has worked in Nigeria. It has worked in Uganda. It has worked in Kenya. So it's being directly applied here. There is a lot of violence. Our community space has been shut down. 21 people have been arrested. It keeps going like this in order to sensationalize homophobia and also threaten and instill fear in LGBT people and their allies so as to break their spirits, make them disband in order to make in order to basically break up the last line of defense. So in doing this, they continue to throughout the efforts of LGBT activists in this way, and by adding all these strategies. First, funding politicians, funding anti-LGBT promotion. Second, breaking down activists, breaking down the LGBT community so that they cannot defend themselves. Third, using Christianity especially to instill fear in an already homophobic population. They are able to get the entire country that they've targeted to turn against LGBT people. And then once they have the legislation in place, because it is so against human rights, what happens, especially in the case of Nigeria, is these laws are not directly enforced, but they give so much room to do a lot of harm to LGBT people. All the progress we've seen in terms of legalizing same-sex marriage or protection for LGBT people or repealing of harmful laws have come from non-English African countries such as Botswana, Angola, South Africa, luckily, and all of these other places that do not have such strong ties to the US. So I believe that language is definitely a main proponent, and the evangelical church is currently the root source of homophobia that is currently being experienced on the African continent. And all of these things that these countries have experienced, that Ghana is currently experiencing, is very deliberate. It's very intentional. There is a main agenda here. There are hands moving pieces behind the shadows. And it is so complicated that us at the grassroots do not even begin to see how deep this goes into. So the African context, in terms of especially Anglophone Africa, is very bleak because there's a high infiltration of these evangelical movements, and they continuously fund and advance their causes. Unfortunately, in the not so Anglophone parts, we are actually seeing as knowledge is spreading and as education awareness increases and as activist work is pushed further, there is a slow but steady move towards progress and towards the protection of LGBT people. Yeah, so that is the general context of Africa in terms of oppression and liberation of LGBT people.
Thanks so much. Thank you very much. That was a really interesting introduction to the topic. Very, very interesting and disturbing at the same time. So that's a great start. So what I'd like to now call on Jechi Tano, who's going to talk for 10 minutes about the politics of sex. So I'll hand over to Jechi now.
Yes, thank you very much, Ilo, and thanks to Suhaida too for an excellent introduction. And I think that one of the things that she's managed to achieve is to kind of make my work a bit more easier and more straightforward, because she's established the fact, beyond any doubt at all, that the position and views about sex and sexuality, the status of people of different sexual identities, is something that evolves. It changes. Okay, you can have a situation like she has eloquently described, where those rights and the social space for those people is on the back foot, or you can have other situations where it moves in a more progressive direction. That gives us every incentive, not only to understand this situation a lot more, but also to begin to do something about it, because efforts, activism, organization, education, networking, support, solidarity, all of these make a difference. And that's, I think, as Ilo said from the beginning, that's one of the things that we're hoping to achieve today. Of course, our understanding of this phenomenon is rooted in two things. I'm speaking as a socialist, as a member of one of the organizations that are organizing this meeting. The first is that it is true, as Suhaida too has shown, that sex and sexuality, sexual relations are historic in the sense that they change according to social change over time. Okay, nothing is innate or natural or given or strictly reducible to biology, for example. Okay, and that for us, so that's one dimension of that I think we ought to try to understand in the few minutes that I have. The second one is that the threat to any particular group of people, an oppressed group of people, and by oppressed I mean a particular group of people who have some characteristic in common, whether it is their gender, like women, whether it is their race, like Black people, whether it's their sexuality, like LGBT plus people, whether it's their ethnic or whatever race, so on and so forth. A particular group of people which is systematically subjected to less than the average treatment that everybody else gets. So you will find that LGBT people are the specific target of hate crimes. They are the specific target of extra repression by the police and the courts, as we're seeing in the current case in Ho and so on. I'm sure they face discrimination when it comes to access to health in all manner of ways. We all saw what happened at the beginning of the global HIV/AIDS pandemic when it was dismissed as a gay flu and all kinds of, we know what has ensued, that the avoidable tragedies that ensued as a result. I'm sure LGBT people, if they were open about it, would be discriminated in terms of, access to education, even Rasta people are, access to, employment and so on and so forth. So that systematic treatment of one group of people, okay, specifically target, is what we understand by oppression. And our understanding of that oppression and why all of us should take an interest is that it divides all of us, that it enables us, it turns attention away from the central problems that are impacting the lives of a majority of people, and encourages that majority of people to look to the differences between them as the source of, the most important thing, and therefore the source of their and the source of their anger and the source of their emotional, intense emotional concern and so on. But the fact does remain that, when things are on the up, when people are looking up, so for example, a lot of the modern gay liberation thing started in the same United States that Suhaida too was pointing to as now being a citadel. Who's that renegade? Sorry, there's a loudmouth, character terrorizing the rest of us. Anyway, so basically, the same United States, which is now a citadel of the far right, especially the evangelical far right, is also the home of the modern gay liberation, LGBT plus liberation movement. Why? Because in the 1960s, you found a situation where there was this, serious upsurge in women's equality, the fight for women's liberation, along with Black civil rights, along with, opposition to the role of the United States globally, especially in the case of the Vietnam War that was ongoing. And that is why actually, when gay people who were oppressed and driven underground began to rise up, they actually adopted some of the language and the norms and the organizational names that they saw around them. So when things are on the up, people look to each other for inspiration. They look to each other and increasingly they're striving for common causes that expand the bounds of freedom, expand the bounds of material protection for themselves and their families and so on and so forth, begin to overlap, and actually you have a forward movement taking place. Now in Africa, in the situation that Suhaida too has described, of course, is accompanied by a deepening social crisis. A deepening social crisis whose roots are economic in the sense of particularly pronounced economic inequality, which is growing, it's not reducing. We see that socio-economic crisis expressed in the manner in which, let's say, wealth is created. So let's say that this intense, if you like, focus on natural resource extraction, which includes removing people's property rights, those who might have had, access to communal rights of use of land or water and so on and so forth. All of that is threatened. And when those people and can no longer farm or can no longer do something else, basically you find a situation where they also become cheap labor as well. So impoverishment in terms of command over productive resources, impoverishment in terms of jobless growth and unemployment and low wages and and so on and so forth. These things mean that you have a social crisis on your hands. Everybody, the powers that we used to talk in terms on the one hand of a demographic explosion in Africa, youth and so on, and the means by which that youth is controlled. That youth which is no longer subjected to some patriarchal control in the home. It is becoming increasingly urbanized. It's increasingly questioning things. It is becoming increasingly unstable in its own worldview and so on and so forth. That kind of thing has to be diverted to somewhere else. And therefore, there is a subsoil. It's not simply about the American evangelical right. We also have to ask ourselves, what are the conditions here that enable these messages to be so receptive? Why are we in a position to, and every time that we have seen that the powers that be, especially the most unaccountable and unelected powers that be in our society, priests, yes, imams, chiefs, whenever those most unelected people are the strongest, that is when ordinary people or sections of ordinary people suffer the most. So when you have a situation like ours today, where some of the most powerful and influential forces in society decide to go on a crusade against one of the most marginal and vulnerable groups in our society, if you are, even, you don't even have to be a socialist, even if you're just a regular, decent person, you have to be allowed. Because it is also happening in the context of what I've described, as well as the context of all kinds of fractures and fissures that are taking place at the bottom of society itself. So we've seen this assault on LGBT rights, by, as Ilo pointed out, by this illegal interpretation of whatever exists as law, because all we know is that there's a criminalization of acts of unnatural carnal knowledge, whatever that means. I'm not 100% sure. But now when you are moving to criminalizing LGBT people for talking, you are no longer criminalizing an act, you are criminalizing the person. I mean, it has moved on considerably, and we have to give consideration to that. This is happening alongside the incredible amounts of violence that is taking place against women. How many stories haven't we heard in recent weeks about women being battered to death by their boyfriend, their husband, whoever else, simply because they believe that they own them, so to speak. Okay, and it's happening, alongside an intense mobilization of youth for all kinds of, vigilantes type activities on the one hand, and on the other hand, a kind of, stultifying of youth initiative. Any attempt to look different, you come under attack. So the Rasta guy can't go to school, and so on and so forth. So this is the context within which it's happening. As Pericles, was it Pericles? Well, one of those famous old, Greek wise men, and there were quite a few, and they went exactly short supply in ancient Greek. But whoever it was said that the fact that you do not take an interest in politics doesn't mean politics won't take an interest in you. In other words, the crisis is not about LGBT people having to, like you heard Ursula, the Minister of Communication, say the other day on TV or radio or whatever it was, that, sexuality is a private thing. Sit in your home. How can you be sitting in your home when people are entering there to abuse you, terrorize you, blackmail you, and so on and so forth? In the same way that the essential identity that you have, that enables you to understand your place, your control over yourself, your autonomy of person, your relationships with people, including the most important relation of love and romance and sex and so on and so forth. When that is stripped away from you, you are barely no longer a human being. And that's what we have seen historically, that whenever the inimical power grows in society, whenever equality is under attack, that is when these divisions arise. And even if you look at the history of sex, we see that. Very quickly, we all know that for an overwhelming majority of human existence, about 95% of the time that we've been on this planet, human beings have lived in what we call band societies, hunter-gatherer societies, which are, broadly speaking, egalitarian societies. They have to be, because that's the only way in which they can survive anyway, since they simply hunt, forage, and hunt, and so on and so forth. Everybody's contribution is necessary for the survival of everybody else, and that you have to regulate, for example, the size of the band, because you don't have an assured supply of food. You have to be able to mobile, you have to have a manageable population. So birth is controlled by women. Whether to have it's controlled by women, but it's also controlled by the group with women in the lead. Whether you have a child or not is not an individual decision. You don't even have individual property in that sense, or individual relationships that this is my husband, my child. Those are not the kinds of things that exist there. It is a highly collective, highly egalitarian society. When we move from there to having, let's say, agriculture, a settled agricultural population, the notion changes. Because then straight away, it is not about controlling your population. It's about expanding your population. You need more arms, hands to work the land, for example. When you are growing, when you're an agricultural population, you also have a situation where, you can create a surplus, which is more than the immediate everyday needs of everybody else. So that becomes the basis of trade. Those who do the long distance trade and are not busily having babies to increase the population, those people gain greater strength. Once societies begin to produce surplus and begin to trade, war also becomes possible, because you can wage war to see somebody's surplus. And therefore, all those types of people, while women's biological function as simply having a capacity to give birth, is being accentuated in terms of their primary social role, and that there's a division between the economic production and the social reproduction which takes place within the home, which now becomes the specialization of women. From that point in time, the role of women in terms of the control over their sex changes. They no longer have control. It is only men who do. And in fact, when you look at ancient societies, pre-agricultural or pre-class societies, as I'm describing, sexual variety was the norm, as simple as that. But if you look at early class societies like ancient Greece, from where Pericles and so on and so forth, it was the norm only among men. Why? Because the fundamental property right that gave people power in that society was slaves. So the men who were slave owners had the freedom and the leisure to meet in the square to do all kinds of things. But also, because it was a slave economy, the role of the family in reproducing the economic workforce was not as important. And that's why sexual relations also for those sexual relations outside the family could be in that kind of role. The main role of the family, especially was simply to ensure that you pass on your property, your property rights, you have inheritance, and so on and so forth, and so on. This, and by and large, whenever you've had this kind of loose hierarchies being developed, people don't necessarily promote LGBT rights traditionally, but they have a variety of ways, as to whether to said. It's not a central issue.
That's 2 minutes.
Okay, cool. It's not a central issue. It becomes a central issue when, in the core of the global system that we have today, when imperialism arises, the control of the world by great powers spreading their tentacles everywhere. The fact that they want to actually begin to generate ways of generating economic surpluses which benefit them. They want to ensure that the population is controlled in a certain way. At the same time, that same population, because of all these modernizing trends, is also changing. It's becoming a lot more urban. The traditional norm of the family and how it should be controlled, so in addition to the fact that you want to control populations, you want to control access to marriage, you want to control access to sex as a way of controlling youth, and so on and so forth, also comes this layered colonial need, which arises from their own metropolitan home country. So if you take a country like Britain, throughout the 19th century, at the height of the Industrial Revolution, it became clear that the overworking of women and children was threatening the coherence of the family. At the same time, you also found that the urbanization and the lack of, the weakening of traditional norms was also leading to different sexual freedoms and so on and so forth. That is when laws were brought into being to do two things simultaneously. One was to ban women from certain types of employment. In other words, push them back into the home so that they can focus on giving birth and being a good wife and good mother and good providing care for their family and so on and so forth. The other was to criminalize homosexuality and any non-heterosexual male-woman type thing. And this was what was exported to the colonies as well. So whoever, as Suhaidat said, is saying that we are traditionally homophobic or naturally homophobic, all that is patently untrue. And if you bring that to today's, which is where I want to end, what's important here is this, is that when we look at the kinds of, hatred that is being generated by LGBT, the irrational fear, even about any talk of sex. Let's not forget that it's only about a year ago or so, a couple of years ago, when the idea of sex education in schools was actually attacked by the same constituency who are being promoting and building and investing in generating homophobia in Ghana. Why? Because for them, any knowledge of sex will encourage promiscuity. Whilst all the evidence from everywhere in the world suggests the complete opposite. That the more people know, especially young girls, know about their rights and their sexuality, the more they have things like a knowledge of that they can say no when they don't want, they have access to contraceptives, they can do all kinds of, make all kinds of informed choices. You find that teenage pregnancy falls. You find that even where there's a right of abortion levels decrease and so on and so forth. Here, what you find is in the past 3 or 4 years, because of the problems of inequality and poverty that I'm talking about, the amount of abuse of young children. If you look in all the northern regions of Ghana, as well as central region and so on. In other words, the poorest regions, the areas of Ghana where poverty is growing the most, you find fistula, the physical breaking of the space between, the sexual area of young women manifesting itself massively in terms of the growth of its incidence. This is a sure sign that even if nobody is studying the question specifically, the abuse, the sexual preying, and the sexual, use of young women is going through the roof precisely because of the conditions that I'm talking about. Anyone who wants to address a society in which there's a humane sense in which all of us become increasingly less afraid of one another, increasingly become more, have our scope of human liberation is important, and so on, has to be able to understand that this is a fight that should not be allowed to be won by the homophobes. And that is a fight that ought to tie together to our interest in ensuring that the rights of women, especially, decent, proper, self-chosen, independent, healthy sexual relations thrive, but that above all, the inequality that is fundamentally being drilled into our society at the level of the economy, at the level of politics, at the level of access to resources and so on. So it's also challenged in the process, and that will not allow this kind of diversion to take place. Solidarity with LGBT people today is one of the front lines. That's why socialists have to be there, and all of us also have to join alongside in that fight as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Baz. That was wonderful. Now what we're going to do, we're going to introduce Alex Donko, who is, many of you know, he's the president and the spokesperson of LGBT plus rights Ghana, and a really fearless activist like so many of that group. And I'd just like to welcome Alex too, who's going to talk about the situation in Ghana currently. So Alex, I open the floor to you, please.
Sure, thank you very much. And thank you, Suhaida, and thank you, Babs. You've really expanded this conversation to the point where I guess I'm not going to take even the 10 minutes that is given to me. So I'll first of all start from 2006, because that was when we actually began to hear the conversation around LGBTQ, or the rise of homophobia in Ghana through the media space and all. In 2006, there was an event that was supposed to take place somewhere in Koforidua, and this event is actually one of the events that the LGBTQ organizations usually organize here in Ghana. And that is to say, it's a training or a workshop on human rights and empowerment programs. Interestingly, when this event was going to come on, one media house called Joy FM put it out there that it was a gay conference that was going to happen here in Ghana. And this led to the rise of homophobia within the Ghanaian media space and all, which also allowed for the president then, that was J. Kufuor, to say that he is not going to allow for this conference to happen in the country. And let me also say that there has been organizing and mobilizing of LGBTQ organizations in Ghana around that time. And one of the organization is CPEG, Center for Popular Education and Human Rights Ghana. This is an organization that was also looking at the interests of LGBTQ persons, especially gay and bisexual men, because around that time was also the rise of HIV around those times. So there was a need for an intervention for the HIV virus that was spreading across Ghana, and especially among men who had sex with men. So an organization like that began to mobilize itself, began to rally support and all of that. And so that was what, as part of that activity, was the 2006 activity where they were supposed to do that training to allow for people to go through training sessions to empower themselves to be able to also support other gay and bisexual men in their various community and in their various vicinity in which they find themselves. Of course, when this issue came up, the media then sensationalized the issue that led to President Kufuor at the time making a comment that he's not going to allow for LGBT to thrive in Ghana. Around that time, to one particular person around that time was Magdalene, and he was also the director for CPEG. His image was paraded all around the Ghanaian media space, such that it was very threatening for him at the time. So he had to run into hiding. He had to flee to the next country to seek for security around that time, because his security was greatly compromised at that time. Around the same time too, also the organizing and the mobilizing within the LGBTQ community was also breaking, because people were afraid to even mobilize or organize themselves around that time. Moving forward from 2006 was also around the time where President John Evans Atta at that time also um, was then Prime Minister of Britain, Cameron, if I'm not mistaken with his name, suggested that it is about time that they remove laws that discriminate against LGBTQ persons in their country, to which he made the reply that he is not going to allow for LGBTQ to thrive in the country, and that these Western countries cannot dictate for them and all of that. This also continuously led to LGBT conversation within the Ghanaian media space. And also around that time was also the increase in evangelism or Christian evangelism in Ghana. So these evangelical groups and these Christian groups were also sensationalizing the issues around LGBT, demonizing LGBTQ persons, and using examples like Sodom and Gomorrah as the basis to which LGBTQ persons should not be allowed to thrive in society. And also around the same time was also when the Islamic group around that time were not that vocal so much, but then the Christian group mostly were that vocal. And then also looking at our population, majority of the population are also Christians, and it means that whatever their religious group or their religious leaders say to them is what they run with. And so the increase in homophobia begins to shoot up. All right. And then around the same time, too, were also organizations that were also springing up within the LGBTQ community to also continuously provide services and support to marginalized groups. Because when this Christian group continue to demonize the LGBTQ community, it means that it continuously push the community to the background to the extent where as much as possible you have to be invisible within the health sector, invisible within the police institution, or even reporting issues of abuse to the police and all of that, invisible within the family, invisible in the society and all of that. Like, there is no way you can manifest anything that gives you up as being different from the norms that is being established by mostly this Christian group. And so it means that whoever expresses any form of gender identity or sexual orientation means that you have to do it in hiding. And it also means that when you hide to do things, it means that you can also seek support or help that you need as an individual. So this also led to some organizations within various communities and within various society beginning to also like mobilize themselves to provide support for. So we also saw the rise of priorities on rights and sexual health, Hope Alliance Foundation, uh, Courageous Sisters Ghana, One Love Sisters, to mention a few. These are all organizations that were providing support for people who identify or are perceived as LGBTQ persons within the various communities and society in which they find themselves. Okay, so, but then of course, around 2013, was also when an organization like the Coalition for Proper Human Sexual Rights and Family Values also began to manifest themselves and begin to gain relevance within the Ghanaian media space, and then began to also sensationalize issues around LGBTQ, and then portraying themselves as a united front, right? So could they call themselves the Coalition for Proper Human Sexual Rights and Family Values? And then when you look at the description to which they give themselves, they say that they are a coalition of both Christians and Muslims and traditional people and politicians and all of that. So they portray this united front. That means that whichever form that you identify yourself within the Ghanaian space, these people are there for you, and what they are looking at is to protect their family that they say they call themselves, the proper family that they say they call themselves. So this organization led by lawyer Moses Fuamwini as one organization that was pushing for like homophobia within the Ghanaian space, and then rallying around religious organizations and the media and politicians and all. And then they just don't rally around them, but then they also go with a threat that if you do not, as a religious organization or as a media or politician, support us or give us your support, then we are equally going to demonize you and say that you support LGBTQ. And so for some reason, all these institutions have to join them in a way, or have to equally like speak up, or have to be part of them, just so people do not attach them or do not align them as being supportive of the LGBTQ community. So fast forward to 2018 is where some of us, like some of these young LGBTQ persons, also saw the quietness that existed even within the LGBTQ community. The fact that there has been that continuous silence as a result of the homophobia that is put out there, or that has been portrayed out there by this anti-LGBT group. We saw that isn't the way to go, that if we really want to cause the change that we deserve, we need to move from that hiding that we have been all this while and begin to be visible and begin to demand for the rights that is supposed to be accorded to us as equal Ghanaians. And so that is where we also began to like mobilize ourselves within LGBT Rights Ghana. First of all, I initially started it off as a cyber activism blog, and in 2019 we decided to like move it from just a cyber activism blog, and then now begin to put faces behind the movement and then begin to move it forward. And so that's where you saw the likes of some of my colleagues who are also like very young also now begin to like mobilize ourselves to cause this change that we believe is supposed to happen in this country. And so we began putting together our core values, and then also began putting together initiative and activities that allows us to empower ourselves to cause this change. And so as part of this initiative was also to create a community space, a physical space where we can come around and then begin to like strategize, and also begin to allow for community members to find a vantage point where they can even report issues of abuse and even learn from each other and grow together as a community. And as part of the strategy was how come we created the space in early this year to allow for the continuous push for the change that we needed in this country. But unfortunately, when we created this space was when this same anti-LGBT group, the same group that has been pushing against LGBT rights in Ghana all this while, came up again and then issued a press conference to further push us to the background and then break the front line to which this change is being pushed, and then also allow for the continuous striving of evangelical or evangelical agenda and all. And so that is how come our space at the time was closed down. And then around this time was also where the media, who is supposed to like that is supposed to be like unbiased in situations like this, also begin to like rally around these anti-LGBT group. That is also because they have also be giving enough resources to this group. And then the fact that even some of these churches and some of these religions using anti these churches are, are their source of funding and their source of support. And so if they manifest or give the neutral ground to which conversation can be had, an opportunity, then it means that they are going to lose their resources and all of that. So they have to portray themselves or see themselves as anti-LGBT group, extent where we even had an opportunity to speak on some of the issues or the matters that arise when the place was closed down. There was still the manifestation of homophobia within this media spaces and all, to which they didn't even allow for a balanced conversation within the media space and all. And so and then also saw the rise of some politicians coming up to say that there should be a clear legislation that bans LGBT Q persons and its advocacy and all. And then also saw the rise of the church especially, and then some religious group also issuing the communique and all of that to further push against the LGBTQ persons in the country. When this arose, of course, we also saw the rise in so many other struggles, like the Rastafarians, even within the Islamic group and all the discrimination that also manifested itself from those areas, from even Christian groups that uh, they supported to oppress the LGBTQ community around that time. Around the same time was also where about 22 persons were arrested in the eastern region, and then the reason being that they were having a lesbian wedding or of some sort. Okay, moving forward is what is now happening now, where about 21 persons who were going through training session uh, in the Volta region are now also behind bars because uh, some people believe that it was an LGBT activity that they were doing, and for that matter, they got arrested. And interestingly, in all of this situation, anytime it happens, the LGBTQ community find itself in a very devastating and in a
Okay,
very
you
difficult
someone who's just giving.
moment, a time where it is very difficult for the community to even mobilize themselves because everybody is agitated and everybody is worried about the current situation and all. And so sometimes even thinking through a situation to find solutions for it even becomes very difficult. And it's also around that time where allies are like really, really, really needed around that time to continue the conversation on the issue, because around that time we need to like really find or rally support from so many sources to support the LGBTQ community, to which sometimes you get a question like, how can I be of help? But the truth is that around that time, people cannot, whoever is at the front line cannot really think through quickly to give specific answers to this. And so it will really need like allies to quickly be doing the thinking around that time and be giving a very specific suggestion around that time to the community and all of that around those times. And to be honest, around the time where we are now like rallying support from so many other areas, including the socialist movement and then ELO to be specific, have all given some support around this time where we needed even lawyers to support these people who have been arrested by the police and all. And then also looking, just like Suhaida said earlier, some of these efforts that they do is to break the activists and then the advocates who are pushing for this change to happen, just so they can allow for conservative ideologies to thrive in the country. And I have been in the Volta region to even see the people who were arrested by the police, these 21 persons, and the condition in which they even live in the police cells is very dehumanizing. One that personally, from standing at the outside looking within, even broke me. And so this clearly shows that there are efforts by these people to break the community such that we do not continue the work that we are doing. And this, like I mentioned earlier, happened in 2016. It's been happening all through, to the point where some of us who are even at the front line trying to push for the change to happen are equally being targeted and are equally trying to be breaking just so we cannot continue with the work that we are doing. And so this is a time, just like Bob said, it's a time where we really need to rally support from every struggle that exists within the Ghanaian society to forge heads, to be able to work together to push for the change that we deserve. Because like he mentioned also, the struggle is not just LGBTQ struggle alone. The struggle is for women, it's for children, it's for feminists, it's for disabled people, it's for every other person within this country. It's even for religious people too. And so uh, it's been challenging when you look at the history within the LGBT community. And to be able to move from this challenge will mean that we have to collectively see that we in our struggle interlinks, it links together. And so for us to be able to continuously dialogue, to be able to see the way forward and continuously engage to the point where we are allowed to exist peacefully within the Ghanaian society. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks so much, Alex. That was really informative. And it's really, I mean, it's truly disturbing what's happened in Ho. And I think that the enormity of it, of that, the 21 people have been held for so long in police custody in terrible conditions, as Alex has said, and that there was supposed to be their case was supposed to be heard on Friday, and the judge didn't show up. So they're still being held. It's absolutely disgraceful. And also, can I say that the deafening silence of various human rights groups is also difficult. But I think if we bring together all the talks today, from the African context to the why there is sexual oppression of LGBTQI community, of women, of all of that, and then also specifically what's going on in the Ghana context. I think what Alex was showing, that this isn't something new. There's been generation after generation. What I do think is new now is that there's a group of young activists who I admire so much, all of who are really doing well, and despite so much. So let's have a discussion. People are free to talk, but not for too long. Or if you wanted to make suggestions or comments, please use the chat. And also, if you want to raise your hand, then I'll recognize you in order that your hand was raised, and then we can have a discussion. But let's us focus on what's going on, and then how we can build the community together to a coalition around rights. So I see we have a couple of hands up. So I'll call on Leo first. Leo, would you like to say a few words, and then after that we'll have Akua. Okay, Leo.
Come on, we can't hear you. I think you might be muted. Leo.
Bas. Hello. Hello, can you hear me? Hello.
Yes.
Okay. So many thanks, and I think so. I too, Alex made a point about the hate that has been mobilized around.
I think he's gone again. Okay, so okay, can I call in Akua? Would you like to speak?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank
Great.
you all so much for taking time of your day to speak to us. I really enjoyed listening to the speakers and for sharing your perspective from the ground. I actually have 2 questions. My first question is, if coalitions are being built by conservative forces from the global north and global south, in the religious context, how can coalitions be built between progressive faith traditions in the global south and in the global north to counter that coalition being built? And my second question is, Mr. Tano brought up a great point that even though it's important to contextualize how colonialism has shaped our understanding of gender and sexuality, what do we do about the fact that these ideas and these regressive ideas are still resonating with a noteworthy segment of the population on the ground? Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Absolutely great questions on networking, especially and colonial ideas. Okay, so before I call in anybody to answer, I just like to let me see. Okay, Leo, I see you're back. You're back on again. Would you like to make your point? Mm-hmm. Leo, I'm really sorry. I think your link is a bit bad. I'm not able to hear you at all.
So I was making a point about the hate that has been mobilized. Say now, please. Connection. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's so much hate that has been mobilized around the country towards LGBTQ people. And this has also been weaponized to kind of enforce conformity of views. And that same weapon is used to bully people who try to have different views or opinion. And this is what is actually keeping a lot of groups away from expressing solidarity. If you look at the kind of oppression that LGBTQ people are facing in this country is far worse than any other minority. Because if you look at the recent ones of Christians, not even Christians, Christian leaders going against Rastas, going against Muslims, they had the right of response. In the case of the LGBTQ community, they are shut out. They are not given any space at all. And this is because of the demonization and that has been created and the tagging that comes along with it. So you look at this environment of fear, of demonization, because in some respect, people, the kind of environment that they've created, people can actually get lynched. All kind of things can happen to people. So it's keeping a lot of people away. But then what is shameful is that some notable international organizations, I don't want to start mentioning them, but then I think it's about time we start also creating a list of homophobics in this country, including some of the organizations that speak differently out there on the international scene, but then are quiet when these kind of oppression is going on in country. So you have INGOs in this country who are not talking. You also have the media. The media is also under this conformity that is expected. So a lot of the messaging in the media is harshly against LGBTQ people. So they have no space or chance at all in there. And the politicians are also opportunistically following suit. And little wonder the recently arrested 21 people who were just attempting to have a peaceful meeting cannot find lawyers. So I think we need to try and then do something differently, especially where the media is not available on this particular issue. So, for example, how can we create an alternative media space? If the media will not allow LGBTQ people in their studios to present their views, then it's about look at how the Americans went up their civil rights movement and actions in the 1960s. Some approaches like that. And I'll talk about the list. We need situation where
Leo, I'm really sorry, but you're breaking up again now.
those who are trying to gain cheap popularity by organizations and individuals and have it out there. So having an alternative space where some of these grievances that LGBTQ people have could be heard. Thank you very much for the space.
Thanks so much, Leo. Some absolutely excellent points made there. And I see there's a couple of comments in the chat as well. Adote Hoffman is saying, would it be possible to have meetings, such meetings every month to discuss the rights of marginalized groups? And somebody else is saying they support that idea. And indeed, I think it is. It would be a great idea, especially. And we see, Audrey Gantapo is also saying that we need to work through how the media can help and to identify media allies. And I think there's an awful lot of very good, solid stuff that we can do. And I think it is true that we need to get the state institution like SGh to identify. SGh is there specifically on human rights. So let's look at that. But anyway, I just want to just hand over to our speakers. To Suhai Datu, would you like to come in and comment on some of what's been said and some of the comments and some of the discussions? Would you like to respond to some of that?
Yeah, there was an earlier question, but I think I got to mix it up. If we can hear it again.
Yeah, I think it was my question, and it was two of them. Can you guys hear me still?
Yeah.
Yeah. So my first question is, if there's coalitions being built by conservative forces in the global north and global south in the context of religion, how can we build progressive coalitions in the context of religion in the global south and the global north? And I was just highlighting a couple of books that are actually being written, how queer and trans Africans are beginning to use Christianity and Islam as sites of empowerment and agency. There's actually a really good book coming out in July, and it's reimagining Christianity and sexual diversity. And this is in the African context. And then my second question was, yes, it's important to contextualize regressive ideas, continue to resonate with people on the ground.
Okay, so I'll take the first one. First, I would like to set a little bit of a scene. So what is actually causing these religious groups to side against us is not even that they are inherently homophobic. It's that they've taken a part of their religious narratives, which is homophobic, and is being pushed as part of a greater agenda. So there are many people that you can speak to in Ghana if you get like the one-on-one opportunity, that after sounding them out, like they go ahead to appreciate the standpoint of LGBT people. And I feel the main recourse for getting all of these coalitions who are currently very conservative to see from our perspective is to, as we've been saying, marry our differences and also showcase our common oppressor. I think it's very important to also use the same biblical texts as counterpoints and also as conversation starters. But what is daunting about all of this is dissemination, should I say, because you have a complete blocking by the media, and we're living in a country where I think 95% no, not 95, 85% to 87% of the population is not online. Many people don't have phones. Many people cannot read. So one, we cannot even like do this in a big way in order to like change minds in a very grand way, because all the media outlets have locked us out. And doing it digitally also results in like finding ourselves in these echo chambers, in these spaces where the conversations have been had over and over, or like these spaces where the progressive people already know where to go to. So access is a big thing. Getting past the gatekeepers who are decidedly against us to get through to those who might listen to us is difficult. Because all of this is intentional, it makes it very hard to gather collectives or find a very fast route or a relatively productive way of rallying support on the grassroots level. That is, I think, the main hurdle when it comes to mobilizing, especially with regards to religious groups. And because everybody is religious in especially in Ghana, that is the paramount source of moral guidance. So once this issue is seen as a moral one, it's that standpoint that you really need to leverage conviction from, because even if you're politically right, you're legally right, you get all your rights and everything, the perceptions of the general people remain unchanged as long as the gatekeepers do not align themselves. And we also have the problem of allies or other people who are in favor of us, for many of the reasons we are mentioning, refusing to come out or stand up to be counted or publicly align themselves with us. And this is very damning to the movement, especially at this point, because even though all help really counts, it's the visibility that is important. There are respectable people in society that would be listened to if they were the ones making the case. They are like religious leaders. There are these other people that if we could create a safe space for them to be able to disseminate the message, more people are likely to hear. But to answer your question, what is stopping us is a whole lot of barriers to getting to people, and it's also a very understaffed, under-resourced, severely impaired movement on this side of things. So making it a reality of actually even getting more allies is daunting because of how incapacitated we are. And so for me, I am very happy to have the support of the Socialist Organization. I believe from there, we can also move on to other non-religious spaces and be able to logically convince people by aligning our woes to one source, such that we understand that the goal is commonly shared and we can move together in that regard. But with convincing people to unlearn their homophobia, especially from the religious side, is a very bleak prospect, if I'm to say, yeah.
Sorry, Doctor, let me just, there's another hand up here I see. If I can say, is it Papa Kofi? Would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, mine is not a question, but it's more of a contribution. It's more of a contribution. What I see is, first of all, there's a huge coalition, as we all know, against LGBTQ in the country. Then also, we as a community itself, our own people also have their own. They are also not convinced to also support the community itself. So to get the LGBT front strong, then we also have to get most of the community members to support the whole coalition. If we can do that, then I think we'll have a stronger coalition to also stand to the opposite side. And also, as they are all saying, yeah, religion is the biggest agenda against the whole community here. And we also have to find a way to rather educate our community members who are members also of these churches to also come from a viewpoint that will make people who do not understand the whole LGBTQ thing to also understand it well. Because most people think of it as being spiritually possessed in Africa. And if it's spiritually possessed, then you can fight it. It's just like in the US first, when people thought of it to be a mental disorder. So if it's a mental disorder, how do you find it? They tried treating it from various churches in the US and it did not work. I know the LDS church had a whole session that if you find yourself in that, they say it's a mental disorder, so you could come and you'll be treated and all that. It did not work. So to get people to understand, we must start with our community members. That's what I think. And that will build a stronger coalition as a community a community to withstand any sort or any opposition. If we could do so, that will help so much.
Thanks so much, Papa Kofi. That's great, and it's I see that I think Eddie wanted to ask a question. Eddie, would you like to unmute? Eddie, I think you're muted.
How's that?
Better. That's fine.
Okay, great. Good to be here. I'm from the United States. Is Alex still on the call? Alex, are you still on the call?
Yes, I'm right here.
Okay, Alex, I have been following you since the start of this endeavor, and just let me say to you, as someone who's part Ghanaian, I am so proud of you. I'm so proud of you and the courage that you have put forth in taking this stand. It is so needed. I go to Ghana quite frequently, and I'm just amazed at the backlash that we have seen since the closing of the center, and now that everything that's unfolded. What I really want to say to you and to this conversation is, how has this, in my mind, as someone who does not live in Ghana but returns quite frequently, how has this impacted, if you will, the year of return, right? We had this year of return activity in Ghana, and many people from the diaspora were returning to the motherland, if you will. And obviously the pandemic has sort of quieted much of that travel. But post-pandemic, what do you perceive as a vehicle to sort of drive the message home that if Ghana continues with the harassment and the arrest, if you will, of LGBTQ people, that the diaspora, the global Pan-African diaspora, will have something more to say about this than just a few celebrities on this side of the ocean, making statements about it. I mean, I really believe that there is the potential. I mean, we know that recently the United States, the U.S. State Department has come out to threaten not releasing any aid to Ghana. I know the World Bank has made similar statements. What is your belief in terms of globally? Can there be a real impact if more institutions, NGOs, countries, people just stop supporting Ghana in that sense? I mean, I think Ghana has a reputation of being the most peaceful, democratic nation in West Africa, and I think this conversation is beginning to tarnish that reputation. So my question begins, how can we continue to drive that message home globally that, hey, if this continues, it's going to get worse because you're violating human rights.
Exactly. Thanks a million, Eddie. Great point. Alex or Jechi or Suhaidat, Alex, you were addressed directly. Would you like to, or Jechi, do you want to make a point there?
Sure, I can take it up and then she can
Yeah,
equally add
great.
on. So, yes, just as you mentioned, the mobilizing of the LGBT community, just like I expressed during my earlier submission, is that there has been that constant effort to break the front line within the LGBT activism or the LGBT space. And so it means that there is always going to be a shortfall when it comes to the force that the LGBT can mobilize themselves towards. And so it also means that sometimes we can't find ourselves in so many of the spaces that we could have found ourselves in. And so it means that it will take allies and individuals and organizations that believe in human rights to continuously have that conversation in spaces that we don't find ourselves, right? For them to continuously have the conversation. So, Eddie, just like you know of the Ghanaian situation, it means that anytime you find yourself in other spaces, that conversation needs to be had there because I can find myself there. Suhaida cannot find herself there. And it will take allies to continuously talk about the issues and make Ghana aware of their commitment to human rights and the upholding of human rights. Another thing is also that the Ghanaian government is complicit in all of these
Absolutely.
sufferings that the LGBTQ community is going on. So we also need to hit the government in the place where it hits, right? It means that the aids, the support that they are getting, and a lot of these supports are also coming from most of these international organizations and all. If they begin to threaten them with some of these things, and as a matter of fact, even begin to impose some of these things, the government will be a bit careful, right? About how they alter certain words, especially homophobia within the Ghanaian space. Because, like you mentioned, Ghana had that phase of being a very liberal or a very progressive
Exactly.
African country, right? Until
Exactly.
this incident happened, and then it exposed the Ghanaian society in a way that so many people were even shocked. But to the LGBT community in Ghana, we were not shocked. We know and we've always known that a lot of Ghanaians are very vicious and and very dangerous, and especially towards the LGBT community, they don't mind going every length to break the community and break the people within the community. And that is how come we find the 21 people in such a deplorable state and for doing absolutely nothing wrong. So even within this 21, would have seen the rise of people who would have championed LGBT rights, but going through this kind of treatment, I don't know if coming back, they will still have the energy to continue with the work that they are doing. I can only imagine whatever is going through now. That is the situation we find ourselves. So to answer your question, we cannot find ourselves in all the spaces. And it will mean that allies are the ones supposed to have this conversation for us. And in times where places where we need to be connected to even have that physical conversation or that conversation from our end, we can be reached out and then we can equally add on to the conversation that is being had in all of these spaces.
Great. Thanks a million, Alex. And can I just call in Jechi now? Would you like to make a comment or two?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much, and thanks for a lot of the comments that have been made. Is this the final round of comments, or would we get a chance to come back and wrap up? Hello.
I think well, there's a lot of hands up. I know we're going to run over time, but there's a lot of I've got 3 hands up as well.
Then let me just address a couple of things. First is that I found Eddie's comment interesting, but I have a slightly different point of view about it. Okay, in the first place, I think that even in the chat, someone has indicated that when all these big powers, foreign powers, line up on the side of an issue, it kind of generates a response that they're trying to impose on us. And given our history, that's I think a necessary and understandable caution to have when big powers intervene and try to kind of define what should happen inside smaller countries and so on. And of course, we know that the State Department itself, as it is, can't be a consistent ally. So, for example, the State Department policy under George W. Bush or under Donald Trump would have been different from slightly different from what it might have been under Barack Obama or what do you call it, Joe Biden, for example. Okay, so and for me, as a person whose experience and understanding of developing societies and the role of the United States officially, let's say the State Department. You remember, for example, I was saying earlier on that part of the reason why the original gay liberation, the modern gay liberation movement arose in the United States was in the context of a combination of different overlapping, radicalizing, progressive demands and struggles in society, including that against the role of the United States abroad, in that case, in that period, the Vietnam War, for example, the anti-Vietnam War movement and so on. So I would hesitate to begin to count without any uncritical way the United States government and its agencies as my ally. I don't think they are. I honestly must say. That is entirely different from ordinary people in the United States, okay, who themselves have struggled on the basis of, fighting for more rights, and they still have to be doing so anyway. Black Lives Matter, you see the reversal of voting rights in different states in Florida and so on and so forth that is happening. They still have to be doing so anyway. And it is that process that actually we need to find a mechanism of transforming here. I understand, given the conditions, and I mean, Suhaida and Alex haven't even gone into describing the daily experience of LGBT people. It is horrible. We all know, okay? All the abuses that they suffer from police. For example, some time ago, the Commonwealth Human Rights Association based in Ghana here did a survey of treatment of different people in police custody. The two categories of people who suffer the most, including physical abuse, persistent rape, are sex workers, female sex workers, and LGBT guys. Okay, so we know that they face horrid conditions in the communities. There are places where people can go, they seize your stuff if you try and they say, I'll accuse you of being gay, so you're lynched and all that kind of thing. But at the same time, we also have to say that despite all these horrors, there are also others who are also horrified by these acts. And the thing is to find a way to kind of mobilize that kind of thing. When we talk about religion and all that, no religion, no social force, no institution is static. It is the same religion in the most conservative part of the United States, which gave birth to Dr. Martin Luther King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. They had a battle of their hands inside their own churches, inside their own congregations to fight for the things that they did. Yet they managed to do so. It is the same religion which spawned somebody like Malcolm X, a fighter for social justice, who is a symbol of that all over the world, even at the peril of disaffection within his own religious community, and in the end, both of them in terms of the peril of their lives. Religion, as we have known historically, has always been a site for battles about justice as well. And therefore, even within religious movements, there's always been reform. There have always been reform movements and so on. So there is nothing wrong with having a situation today where people of faith in Ghana, of the different faiths, whatever the thing, do not simply use the fig leaf of the Quran or the Bible and the words that are in it as the sole guide, their sole guide. Because they have to live as human beings, even if they want to go to heaven or paradise or whatever it is. The only basis of doing so is what you do among human beings in your and therefore the interpretation, the giving new meaning to religious values. The values may be timeless, the prescriptions may not be timeless. Okay, and it's important that we encourage, and we can only do so if you are thriving in society at heart. And that's why I want to encourage the LGBT people, however difficult your circumstances. You too have to have a broadening of your understanding of oppression, because as you yourself have said, there's an overlap with different struggles. I'll give you an example. I think, Alex, you and I some time ago watched a film called Pride, okay? And somebody raised a point in the chat show that why are organizations like trade unions and so on in Ghana? We all know that in countries like the United States, Britain, and so on, LGBT discrimination was also rife. and it's still rife anyway, but I mean, was a lot more visceral and a lot more enshrined than it is today. Marriage equality and so on are only very recent rights. Trade unions, working class men, and so on were very hostile to LGBT. But we saw that when LGBT people, in the moment of a big industrial struggle in Britain, the miners' strike, which shaped the whole of society and social relations, and was the basis on which the Thatcher program and neoliberal program was relaunched more deeply into Britain, and then became a globalization agenda. The fight of the decision by LGBT people to give solidarity to the miners, sometimes in the face of hostility and lack of reception from the miners themselves, it is their persistence, their argument that won some people over and created that boundary between them. Such that in 1985, you found that that solidarity was cemented, and it is since then that you can say that British trade unions have come onto their own, gradually internalizing that message, and have begun to actually be themselves in the champions of LGBT and other rights such as anti-racism and so on and so forth. And the point that I keep making here is that the whole remit and expansion of rights and then fighting for equality is so vital because of the fractures and fissures in our society today, and the storm that is brewing as a result, which can hit in any kind of direction, including very violent, hateful, atavistic directions as well. We are facing a social crisis, and this is the cutting edge of how things will reshape and people rethink or not. So all of us ought to be bolder, more open, outgoing, and things like media and religion and so on and so forth. There are all kinds of alternatives that are possible. I mean, we can't list everything here. But the thing is not to see any situation as static, and understand that struggle, in this case, the battle over ideas, the struggle around building organizations and networks, struggle makes a difference. Making demands make a difference. Getting people to rethink makes a difference. No matter their religion, this is not the fault of religion. A religion may be the way in which it is the ideological vector through which it is reinforced and mobilized, and it's a ready hand tool. And of course, a lot of the religious leaders are just corrupt bastards. Of course, we've seen clips of them in their different. So leave them aside. It is the ordinary people that we ought to be interested in. And let's not take a dim view that they can't change, they can't shift. All of us can shift, all of us can change. And that is what should inspire us, despite the grim circumstances, to be able to fight and ensure that we make some progress here.
Thanks very much, Bazini. Now I've got a couple of people have hands up. We're going to have to call it a day relatively soon, but I just like to just also slightly direct the conversation that we have a really good suggestion about monthly meetings, around coalition building on this. I think it's coalition building around justice and rights is really important. And as Bazini was saying, understanding the roots of oppression that is central to what we do, and a respect for human beings and so on. So that might be one way of doing it. We've had a discussion, we've had a suggestion as well about a media group. We've a suggestion about building national coalitions and maybe international coalitions around this, and we could do some of these. So I just want to, I think it'd be a lovely way to, I'll ask everybody to round up in a while, but I see Equia and Papa Kofi have their hands up again. If you could just keep your comments super short, and then I'll call all our major speakers in just for a final word. So Equia, would you like to say a word?
No, I forgot to lower down my hand. I just want to thank you guys.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah. Thanks so much. Papa Kofi, is it the same with you, or you wanted to say something again?
I'm okay.
You're okay as well. Okay, that's good. That's great.
I think you're muted.
You're muted.
I just muted myself. Okay, so thanks very much. So I'll get some. I'd just like to get some brief final comments then from our three speakers, just on how we might go forward, and just pulling together all the kind of discussions, especially those in the chat. some really good discussions going on in the chat as well, and what we can do immediately, and then what we can do to bolster the movement. Because I think, taking a lot of the points that Alex was making, that there a lot of what's going on at the moment is deliberate intimidation of the activists, you know, to silence and to intimidate people. So we can take a look at what we can do immediately, but then also what we can do in the medium term around coalition building. I know the Humanist Association of Ghana was also very keen to be involved, and I know there are a lot of feminist organizations to be involved in how we best look at that. So Suhai Datu, I'll hand over to you to say a few closing words of what you think.
Thank you very much. This has been a very informative and great meeting. It's been nice to just sit with people who are as passionate and who want to do the work in helping make this country safe for all marginalized groups. And it's been interesting hearing a lot about our allies and our strengths and leveraging all our opportunities, because the reality we are having right now is, because of the recent spark of homophobia, there is a lot of support, but they are all international. It's hard to get like concrete local support that is not coming from like organized groups and like try to put that together. It looks like our main support base is international. And I've been really thinking a lot about ways in which we can be able to leverage all this international clout, should I say, in order to change the formation of society or impact culture right now. And the main means that I believe is possible is to try to approach this economically. Ghana derives a lot of money from tourism. Tourism is one of our main revenue streams. And these tourists are usually people from the diaspora, more progressive people, people in enlightened spaces who patronize Ghana for touristic purposes. And I believe that with approaching organizations, institutions such as Airbnb, Uber, hospitality management in those spaces, we can offer features which allows them to help us create safe spaces within the country, and also indirectly cause economic change. Here's an example. A lot of tourists use Airbnb, a lot of tourists use Uber in the country. Local people also patronize these services. These services are used by your average Ghanaian or are run by your average homophobic Ghanaian. Now, if there's a feature on Uber that tells you when you order a car that your driver has actually undergone like a safe space training, or can know how to step in case, or intervene in case you're going through abuse, and whatever space they run is a guaranteed safe space, it is going to create an awareness for community members such as myself, so that we can feel more safe if we are ordering a car, if we are going into a bar, a restaurant, if we are visiting a specific doctor, if we are using Airbnb. And also it will inform people entering the country. So I'm hoping that the economical flow will then move towards the chances that people who opt in to take a short course so they can have this tag on their listing on Airbnb or on their car on Uber would have more chances of getting passengers. And this will in turn force them to actually have the conversation or interact with informative material that we can produce. So this is a way that I think that we can harness all the international support we've gained so far to make like proper local change or spread local awareness. Because in this way, we're able to leverage on the international bodies and international spaces to change the cultural perspective or fabric of this country through economical means. And as long as we are also not singling it out and making it LGBT, a safe space for people with special needs, a safe space for women, a place where workers are trained to intervene in crisis situations, are trained on the best manners of handling people, marginalized people, goes a long way to help everybody. And since safety is a priority, I think it's a good way to push it. That's my idea. And it's something that we've thought about a lot internally in LGBT rights, but it's hard to pull off because it needs like the necessary human resources to actually sit down, develop a concept, go to these companies, pitch it, like run through it and make it a thing that can be directly applicable while also thinking about the security risks and all of that. So if there's anybody on here who thinks it's a great idea, who wants to partner with us on doing that, it is well, please contact us. It'll be great to get this on the way. Also, if you have any criticism or any holes you can punch through this to make it better, it would be amazing. And I would like to sign off by saying, there is so much everybody can still do to help with all of that is going on. And if you have any legal help, you have any legal knowledge, you have any sound advice on how to further push this cause, we are open and we would love to listen. Any space that you find yourself, try to educate people as best as you can on LGBT issues, especially the Ghanaians you meet. Most of these people do not think it's deliberate or is intentional or that our struggles are linked. And the more that you make this clear to them, it overrides whatever religious doctrines or ideas that they have imbibed, because then it speaks to rationale. So I would advise that we all urge people towards critically thinking about what is happening as a deliberate attack formed by powerful groups against the marginalized community. Also, please use the hashtags release the 21. Whenever you're talking about these issues, use the hashtag Queer Lives Matter, Queer Ghanaian Lives Matter, the hashtag Ghana Gets Better. They are the points at which we've been trying to have these conversations. And also, please support all the LGBT organizations, all the LGBT spaces that you can find. If you're a part of a movement like the Rotary Club, like a trade union, all of these spaces in which we can get to come to our cause, please reach out. Tell us who we should probably talk to, who might be more sympathetic to our cause. We'll go talk to them so that we can grow in number. The idea of a coalition is also a really great one. We are ready to jump on board. Can also talk to the wider LGBT community about coming on board so that we actually start organizing as a proper front for coming at this issue. Here's the GoFundMe link for the funds that we've been raising so far to aid the 21 arrested in Ho. This is where their legal fees are coming from, their day-to-day upkeep and travels to see them, probably for therapy when they come out. And so if you can share this widely, if you can donate, it is run by a consortium of LGBTQ women in solidarity with the entire organized section of the LGBT community in Ghana. And thank you so much. Let's continue having these conversations and hopefully we can think through political. That's another thing we need. We recognized as a needs assessment that the community, the organized LGBT community in general, does not really have a political or legal or a social framework from which it is working within. We've so far been a loose band of organizations doing our best to support LGBT people within the country. We are not even looking at without, and we have all of these issues. So if you can help us in strategizing, thinking through a political, or legal, or social framework so that we can all be on the same page, it will be helpful. Yeah. And if you are queer, we are here for you.
Great. Thanks a million. That was wonderful. So I'd like to call on Bazini now to make some final comments.
Yeah, hi, thanks. And thanks to Suhaida and everybody else who's contributed. Yes, I agree with her. It's been a very helpful and inspiring, energizing discussion. And that the concrete things that have been put forward is exactly what we should pursue. I certainly support the idea of a united front campaign around LGBT rights. And I think that we can start with that, because that is the immediate front line. And it's important that this front line, we don't waffle around it. There's no reason to make unnecessary compromises. Yes, we would like to embrace all the oppressed, but this is the front line. Okay, and you take a stand on it, and that's on the basis on which actually you reach out to wider people. We should be as clear as we'd like on this matter. So I agree with that. But I also agree that what people have identified as natural allies. One, this is an ideological fight as well. It's a fight around ideas. okay? And we need to sharpen and develop ideas and take those ideas both by way of seeking to win people, but also fighting it out with them just so to get people to reach it. You know, if there are, let's say, women's rights organizations here, the question of sexuality and sex rights. In fact, it's the LGBT people, if you like, are if you want to be simplistic about it and a bit lighthearted about it, are just collateral damage to the real attack being on women, on gender rights and sexuality. Okay, and therefore the real interest that the powers that be have in heterosexual child-producing marriages, anything that deviates from that is deviant. Basically, that's really what it is. But the key to this process is holding down women from asserting their own rights. Okay, and once you have a level of development in society where sex is no longer always tied to procreation, and that you have things like contraceptions and so on, and therefore the immediate connection between sex and reproduction is broken, then people have a greater room to explore. And as the thing that defines human beings more than anything else, I mean, if you hear people like the former speaker, Mike Okwe, and people like that saying that even goats don't do it. I don't know anything about the sex life of goats, but it tells me, excuse me, he's a very stupid man. Because in the first place, okay, he's a low life and a stupid man. Because in the first place, the thing that defines human beings is precisely the fact that our lives are not simply defined by our material needs, but our conscious and spiritual needs as well. If I say I like jazz music, as opposed to high life, there is no material basis for it. It's a spiritual need. Or I like the color blue rather than red, and so on. And that is what so we keep changing and expanding. We're not limited by our biology. We're not limited by, so the fight for the transformation of the scope of human development is necessary in a society as riven with crisis as ours is. And if we are able to take a stand on this, LGBT people are seen as an easy target. They are vulnerable. Presumably, the majority are homophobic and so on and so forth. Let's test that proposition a bit more. Majority may simply go along because they haven't had any alternative point of view. And I'm saying that those organizations which profess to stand on certain things, like trade unions, women's rights, we shouldn't let them get away easily. Either they come out for sure that they are LGBT or not, or we get allies within them. One way or the other, we have to take the fight to those spaces as well and get people who will commit. And there will always be people who will be ready and willing to do so. And those organized spaces are important. What we do on the university campuses, for example, that's where a battle of ideas comes naturally to the terrain and to the purpose of the place. All the religious communities themselves. I mean, all these youth fellowships, I mean, whether Muslim youth or Christian youth or God knows whatever youth, all of these ought to be brought on board as well. Women's fellowships, so on and so forth. So I think there's a lot of room, and it is in trying to produce literature and resources and ideas and podcasts and films and for those groups. That's how you also begin to do alternative media. Let's not fool ourselves. The media monopoly is not unique to Ghana. Everywhere you go, powerful people own the media. And powerful people are those interested in circumscribing the freedoms and choices and self-determination of ordinary people. It's as simple as that. So everywhere you go, that media monopoly is there. It's even more rife, perhaps in many ways than Ghana. But if you have a situation where our own ideas, our capacity, our confidence, our capacity to organize, raises this issue and begins to change perceptions of it, so will you get sections of the mainstream media, a minority section of the mainstream, also changing along with it. It is part of the same fight. So let's see that way and try and push, try and push as far as we go. But in practical terms, I think this idea about a united front campaign is important. And one of the things that we, the International Socialists and the Socialist Students and Workers Network can contribute is a basic platform of ideas and demands that can inform such a campaign. What it should stand for, or just as a proposal for the rest to discuss. And also some discussion about the nature of oppression and sexual oppression and LGBT oppression, our understanding of it. I think we don't, because everybody needs to know what they're signing up to. Everybody, the more you can't have a united front campaign if we don't have shared perspectives and so on and so forth. I think we're in a position to do so. We'll be quite happy and honored to do so. But let's keep up the fight. And despite however much into it ghettoized that LGBT people are forced into or sometimes feel, let's also know that human beings are, they can be, Alex put it, they can be bad and evil and hard and horrendous, but they can be the opposite as well. Okay, and the thing is, let's have those hopes as well. And there are organizations which are bound to want to fight for some degree of change, however truncated, however small, however narrow-minded it has become. Trade unions are there to defend the majority of people who are the working people, and women's organizations are there to defend rights and so on and so forth. Youth is when people think and experiment with everything from music to so on and so forth. Let's take a bolder stance, and I think we can make some real mileage and make some real progress. But the attack on LGBT is the leading arrowhead of an onslaught of conservative ideas to force back conformity and so on. So the threat faces many more people. As I said from the beginning, even if you're not interested in politics, it doesn't mean politics is not interested in you. Many of us will pay a heavy price if this tactics of slicing of one community over the other is allowed to become normalized. It goes unchallenged and it becomes becomes entrenched as actually this thing. The spaces that you are arguing for in Uber and so on and so forth, all well and good. I believe that the real power lies in where people work, where people are gathered in their big numbers in strategic spaces like colleges, workplaces, and so on and so forth, and in those organizations who made it their own voluntary business to be. I think that's where real power lies, and that's where I would say we should mobilize the most. And safe spaces come from numbers. It comes from all kinds of things. About not many people will be able to go for consciousness training or whatever you were suggesting and so on. I mean, so let's find ways to. No, not the criticism.
Of course. No.
You don't have to respond. I'm simply
it's definitely like I wanted to tell you like something about it. Yeah. There's really a very straightforward way of doing it inside.
Sure, I'm sure. I don't doubt at all. But basically, I'm simply saying, to me, the real power of ordinary people lies where their material interests are there, where they have some degree of control over the way in which the system operates, how it makes profit, how work goes on, how it doesn't go on, and so on and so forth, and where they are congregated in some important strategic spaces. I think there's many things that we can do and build other types of international solidarity, even as we are building a national. The decisive thing is the home front. But and also build different types of solidarity. We don't necessarily always have to look to big business or state departments or embassies and so on and so forth. But real ordinary people also fighting from below for democratic change in their own societies as well. Thank you.
Great, thanks a million. So the last word then tonight, I'm going to give it to Alex. If you want to just say a few words just to close out the meeting.
Sure, Ilo, thank you very much. And what I will say is that just like Jechi and Suhaida had already expressed, I'm going to re-emphasize on the fact that we need to continue the conversation, and doesn't matter whatever platform we find ourselves, we need to continue the conversation because the masses are the ones that are equally directing the narrative and how the treatment and everything is going to go like. And so once we are able to get the conversation to the masses, it doesn't matter whatever platform, we believe that some change, some way, somehow is going to happen from there, and it's equally going to have its rippling effect. Let's continue to also support the existing LGBTQ organization and activists who are already on the front line with whatever support that needs to be, both material, physical, and emotional support whatsoever. Also, let's continue to support even from the legal angle as well, because currently I think one of our challenges also having to do with the legal angle. If we're able to get enough support from the legal angle, I believe that we can all do our work knowing so well that there is a whole stronger legal backings behind us. One other thing also what I will also say is that let's continue to also donate and financially also towards the LGBT community here, because we need a lot of money to do mobilizing and organizing. And currently we are short with even regarding financial resources to even support the 21. We are still going ahead to push for the GoFundMe to allow for crowdfunding to support in all of this, but let's continue to financially support in areas where we can be connected to financial support. Let's continue to do that. And then the last thing will be that we need a lot of allies in so many spaces in which we find ourselves. It could be allies that we don't know, and it could be allies that we believe, or you believe that introducing them to us would equally help in the fight for LGBT rights. And so what I would like, the last thing I would say that thank you all very much for this opportunity and this conversation. Let's continue to have the conversation. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks so much, Alex, and thanks to everybody who's contributed here today, all our speakers, all our participants, all the questions and discussions. And this is the first of many. I love the idea that we make this a regular thing, and I know that there are other people who would be also interested in joining in. But really, let's do that, and we can start it up by perhaps setting up like a mailing list or a you know, a wider group. I know we're all in touch on WhatsApp, but let's maybe commit to being back here the you know, in a month's time, and we just just keep this up. In the meantime, the very best of good luck in the legal battles out in Ho. We're thinking of everybody, wishing every solidarity to all of you, and we've taken on board a lot of the stuff that Alex mentioned there about the nature of solidarity isn't just in what can we do, but also coming up with ideas about what can be done. And I think that's also important. So thanks very much, comrades. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and see you back here very shortly. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, Alex.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, Siadatu.
Bye.
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 Bye, Murag.
See ya.
Hey, Morag.
Solidarity, guys.
Bye.
And invite a friend for the next meeting.
Bye.
Yeah. And quite a few comrades would like to come, but it was sunny today in London, which is very rare. So they're really happy that you've recorded the meeting, and I'll be knocking it onto them once you get it up.
Brilliant.
Cheers. Thank you. It was the only chance of seeing you, Ilo, as well as to join your political meetings. These are rubbish.